Good morning, students. Today we're going to continue 11.3 and day 2, and that's going to be continuing solving equations involving, instead of square roots, it's going to be cube roots. So yesterday in day 1, we learned how to solve equations involving square roots, and now we're going to focus on the cube roots. So let's have fun doing that. And let's just recall the information. How do we solve cube root and 1/3 power equations? Well, just like the square root or the 1/2 power, the way to undo it is raise both sides to the second power, and that's what we did yesterday, right? With those equations. So it's the same idea here, except we're going to change that square root to what? Cube root. So this is going to be a cube root. So to undo it, we're actually going to cube both sides of the equation. So here's 1/3 and we're going to cube. So that's what we're going to be doing. And as a reminder, remember for square root yesterday, we need to check for extraneous solutions, right? But for cube root, we do not need to check. So you do not need to check. So no check. Okay? So no check on the solutions. That's what we are going to keep in mind. So just like we did yesterday, we're going to just solve the problem by isolating the variable. So we're going to move that 5 by itself to the other side. And now we have cube root of 4x plus 1 is equal to 5. And again, we're going to undo that cube root by raising both sides of the equation to the 3rd power. And that will cancel out the cube root. So we have 4x plus 1 equals 125 minus 1. So this is now like a pre-algebra question. 4x equals 124. And then dividing by 4, we have x is equal to 31. And so remember, we do not need to check that answer. Whatever we found is the answer, the final answer. And hopefully you did all the steps correctly, though, slowly and carefully at the beginning to build up that confidence to make sure that you know what you're doing before you are confident that your answer is correct. So 31 is the answer. So we're going to move on. Here we just have a cube root by itself already. So we are ready to cube both sides. So canceling the cube root, so we have x minus 5. The cubing is going to be a little tricky now because you got x plus 1 3 times, x plus 1 and x plus 1. So we're going to need to FOIL and then superFOIL. So to FOIL, we got x squared plus x, that's plus 2x, and then a plus 1 at the end. And then with that, I'm going to superFOIL with the plus 1. So I've got x cubed plus 2x squared plus x. And then erasing all of this first. Then I have the second one, I'm going to distribute that 1 through. So that's going to be x squared plus 2x. And then plus 1. Combining everything on the right-hand side and bring down the left, we've got x cubed plus 3x squared plus 3x plus 1. And that's what we have. And then I am going to minus the x and add 5 to both sides. So I could zero out the left side. And this is what I have. So I'm going to actually try to avoid using that whole PQ method, which is like, finding the rational zeros, because I see that there's 4 terms here. So I'm going to actually try grouping. So between those two, I have an x squared, and I got x plus 3. And then between these two, I can factor out a 2, so I got x plus 3. Notice that x plus 3 is a common factor. I'm going to factor it out, and I have x squared plus 2 left. And that's equal to 0. And then my zeros are going to be negative 3. And then I'm going to solve the second one, which is going to be x squared plus 2 equal to 0. Subtracting 2 on both sides, I've got x squared equals negative 2. And so the answer is going to be imaginary. So I'm not going to be able to get any real solutions from here. So I'm going to just stop there and conclude that the only solution is x equals negative 3. And here is a third problem. First thing I can see is, besides that cube root right there, is that 2 is in front. So I'm going to actually cancel out that 2 by dividing 2 on both sides of the equation, and that leaves me, I don't like that 1/3 power, so I'm going to write cube root of x minus 50 equals -5. And now I'm going to undo that by taking the cube root of both sides. See how easy that becomes naturally? Your fingers will just be moving on its own once you get the system down. -125, and then adding 50 to both sides, you'll have x equals -75 as your final answer, and that's the end of this problem. It's time for the try it problems, guys. So go ahead and pause the video and try to do these. Remember, this is the time that you're actually learning to do it on your own. So you've seen me do 3 problems. You're going to try these 3 on your own first before you look at the answers. Hopefully you've had a chance to try the problem. So here we are. We're going to take the cube of both sides to undo those cube roots, right? And so we got 3x equals 2x plus 9, and then subtract 2x, and right away we'll have x equals 9 as an answer. Did you get it right? I hope so. In the second problem, I'm going to get rid of that 4 by dividing by 4 on both sides first. So I'm going to rewrite it as cube root of x minus 12 equals -4, and cubing on both sides to undo that cube root. And we got x minus 12 equals -4 times -4 times -4 gives me -64. You can try it, you can work it out with your calculator if you need to. Adding 12 to both sides, and that will yield an answer of -52 as the final answer. And that's the end of the problem. Hopefully you got both of those correct. The discussion question says, a student asked to solve the equation right here, isolated the radical, squared both sides, and solved for x to obtain 14. So this is what the student did. Let me copy the problem. So they isolated the radical, which means move the 9 to the other side. So we got 4x plus 8 equals -8, and then squared both sides right here. To get rid of that, we have 4x plus 8 equals 64, and then solve for the x, so -8, and you have 4x equals 56, and then divided by 4, you have x equals 14. So what's wrong? It seems logical. They follow the correct steps. So only to find out that, because now you're going to check the answer, because it's going to be the square root of 4 times 14 plus 8, and then plus 9 equals 1. So that's 56 plus 8 is 64. Square root of 64 is 8. 8 plus 9 equals 1. That's 17 equals 1. Uh-oh. That does not check out. That means 14 is not an answer. How come? It doesn't seem like the student making a mistake. Well, why could the student have stopped trying to solve the problem after isolating the radical? That's the hint. So after they isolated the radical, so this is the part, let me try to undo this. After isolating the radical, this is what you have, okay? So I'm going to erase everything else. So I have isolating the variable, right? Actually have the square root of 4x plus 8 equals -8. How come we can stop here? Well, take a look at that. You have a square root of a number of something that will give you a -8. Is that possible? Remember we talked about it, referring back to the graph that we did before, when we set the square root as one equation and the negative. There is no way that you will take the square root of any number to get a negative answer. So the student could have stopped right here and say, it is impossible to get a negative answer from a square root. And that's when you could say no solution already. And that's what the student could have done, and that's what they missed. Instead of going all the way to the 14 and then check your answer and then realize, oh, that answer does not work out, right? So that's what the student did wrong. And that's the end of the lesson for today. So go ahead and get started with your homework and have fun. Have a good day.